What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1526 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, the best baseball in the city outside the Dome. Join me this Sunday, August 4th at Christie Pitts. I'm recording live at 2 p.m. I'm just beyond the left field fence. Drop by, say hi. RecycleMyElectronics.ca, committing to our planet's future, means properly recycling our electronics of the past. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut, is Jack Rabid. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I was telling my kids Jack Rabid was coming by, and nobody believes that's on your birth certificate. Nobody believes you're Jack Rabid.
I don't believe it either.
Too good to be true. So at what point in your life, Jack, do you become Jack Rabid?
1978.
Okay, you know that.
I had spent 16 years as under my normal surname because punk rock hadn't been invented yet.
Right. Well, listen, Jack, I love it. Jack Rabid, love it. And we're going to learn a lot about you because I'm very curious about your origin story and, of course, the Big Takeover magazine. I've got some songs we're going to hear. But the focus of today's episode, Jack, will be, how do I describe it? Like the Canadian artists that you love? Is that a good way to describe it?
Sounds good to me.
So I'll be here. I'll be the judge of whether this is true CanCon or not. But may I read, Jack, before we get the origin story, may I read an email I received?
Certainly.
All right. So I'm going to read it verbatim here, exactly as it came in. Hey, Mike. That's me, by the way. Bob Ray in mid-year within a 2-week span. Wow. I like it. Exclamation mark. The Joe Carter Golf Event podcast was interesting too. Well done. I know I ragged you about Jack Rabid of the Big Takeover magazine in the past as a potential very interesting guest on your podcast. You basically told me to back off, LOL, since you have no idea who he is and it's unlikely he would make an appearance in the basement unless he makes the trek in from New York. Now, since you recently asked for guest suggestions, I decided to nag you again. Seriously, I believe Jack would have some very interesting insight, even over Zoom, about a number of great Canadian indie rock punk artists over the past 40 plus years from his American punk perspective. He also reminds me a bit of you as far as being a truly independent business person in a rapidly changing media landscape. You both found your niches. He placed 2 of your favorite artists, Ron Sexsmith, number 18, and Art Bergman, number 70, in his top 100 albums of 2023. He could turn out to be a nice contact person to secure some interesting musical guests in the future, although it appears you already have good sources for musical podcast talent. Anyway, I will stop nagging you about this for now. Keep up the great podcast work. Enjoy the summer. Jim Romanko. What do you think of that, Jack?
That's actually my wife. I told her to stop sending emails like that. No, I think Jim is actually a subscriber of ours, and that's extraordinarily kind and gentle and friendly of him. So thank you very much, Jim.
And my apologies to Jim that if in the I don't remember this, but if in the past I don't know, I get a lot of guest suggestions, right, Jack? And I'm really big on the guests being in the basement, and then I find out, where are you, by the way?
I'm in Brooklyn.
And that's not Brooklyn. We have a Brooklyn near like Whitby or something. This is like Brooklyn, New York.
That's correct. Yes, there's only one.
The one and only, the OG.
Yeah, it's famous all over the world, I've found. I was in Manhattan for 25 years, though, so.
So are you born and raised New Yorker?
I'm a born and raised New Jersey guy, but I try to say that in a real sotto voce, you know. But the second I turned 18 and graduated high school, I moved to Manhattan because I couldn't wait to get there.
Okay, and we're
In fact, I'd pretty much been going there for 2 solid years by then, like every weekend and even some weekdays. So it was a foregone conclusion.
But Jack, who are you to become Jack Rabid into? And we're gonna get some details here on the big Takeover magazine, and I got the jam that inspired the title here. I want to play in a second, but like, I gotta know, like, so you loved music? Like, what's the deal? One day you said, like, I'm just gonna do this because I love it. Like, give me that story.
Well, I joined the Beatles fan club when I was 6 in 1968. So I think it's fairly safe to say I've been a pretty big music fan my entire life. And I mean, my absolute entire life since I was, able to speak and walk and, chew gum. So that's fair to say. Although apart from the Beatles, I just listened to top 40 radio in the 60s and early 70s because it wasn't bad. That was actually not a terrible thing to be doing, right? Buying early Elton John singles or something like that. And then around 1977, some friends of mine got me into David Bowie when I was 15. And I resisted it for a long time because I thought he was just this weirdo. You know how you are when you're 15. Sure. I don't like weirdos. I'm a suburban kid.
Right.
What do I want to have anything to do with this weirdo? And they were right and I was wrong. And within a week, I came to my senses and my entire life has been changed since then. All I've liked is a succession of what a lot of people think are weirdos, starting with, people that Bowie was associated with, like Iggy Pop and Lou Reed and Brian Eno. And from there, it opened up the entire can of worms that there was this new punk rock scene that had just begun. And we're like, well, if this is what they've inspired, we ought to check that out. I mean, before you could even hear this stuff, it wasn't on the radio. Nobody you knew had it. So it was kind of like this giant plunge into the deep end of the pool without learning how to swim first.
And is this where the big takeover? You know what? I promised I'd play some music. Listen, I'm going to play just a bit of music to warm us up here. Just a little bit here.
Morse code.
Can you translate that for me?
No.
All right, now I'm awake, man. It's a Monday morning. Good to be talking to you, Jack. What jam are we listening to right here?
That's a song called Big Takeover of all things.
You know, I forgot you weren't in the basement, so I was lowering the channel, and you're both coming in the same channel here. Let me get you back up there. Okay, the Big Takeover. So give me the origin story on the magazine.
It wasn't my idea. It was my best friend's, the same kid who got me into David Bowie, more or less, him and his best friend. My best friend had a lot of best friends. I was one of them. Anyway, Dave Stein was his name, and he came to me right after we started our band, Even Worse, and said, I've got another idea. I'm like, oh, you're just full of ideas, aren't you? And he said, I want to start a fanzine because we've been buying other fanzines like Backdoor Man and Flipside and Sniffing Glue and stuff like that. And it seemed like you could just put together a couple of pages with a staple or something like that and just talk about stuff you like. But he wanted to do a David Johansen fanzine, and I talked him out of it. I thought that was really stupid. Mind you, he had turned 18 like that week, and I was 2 months past 18, and we were still both in high school. So we weren't like the biggest geniuses on the block in Summit, New Jersey or anything. But I said, you know what? I don't think David Johansen needs a fanzine. He's a famous rock star. because at that time he had, hits in the charts doing Animals covers, believe it or not, and Funky but Chic and stuff like that. So I said, look, why don't we talk about these local bands that we've been seeing in New York who no one writes about at all? That might make more sense. He said, say, you're right. And so he and I produced a one-page, non-double-sided. That's how dumb we were. It didn't occur to us we could type on the other side, too. We wouldn't have known how to do a double-sided one anyway, because in May of 1980, there were practically zero copy shops anywhere. Like Xerox was not a big thing yet.
Right.
And we just gave it away to all of our friends at Max's Kansas City that night, our favorite nightclub, and put a stack at like Bleecker Bob's record store and a few other record stores. And basically he went like, psh, 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 we're done here. Called it a day. Printed up exactly 100 copies on the, I guess it was about 45 seconds a copier at the Summit Public Library for 10 cents each. Because it was the only copier that we knew existed at that moment in time. There was literally like 4 copy shops even in Manhattan back then. Right. It's really an infant technology. But it was typed, on my mother's Selectric. And he wrote half and I wrote half. And I thought that would be the end of it, to be honest. And that was 44 years ago. And here I am still doing it. Dave bowed out after one issue. That was it for him. So he wrote probably about 250 words. And that was the extent of his contribution, other than founding it, really, and asking me to help him.
How many issues in that 44 years?
Well, we were quarterly, more or less, once I decided that issue 2 should begin in the later part of 1980, because so many people asked for one. It was like, really? You want another one? Are you gluttons for punishment? So for a while it was quarterly, and since 1983 it's been semi-annual, every spring and fall. So we've done 94 issues in 44 years and never missed a period.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, back to Jim Romanko, who may or may not be your wife, but Jim says...
yeah, Mary, cut that out.
Jack, congratulations on 44 plus years of publishing your excellent indie rock music magazine. That's a very long time. Recent covers have included, because, Jim knows I'm all about the CanCon over here. That's why. And by the way, we got the songs we're going to play. Like, we're going to kick out some of your favorite, but Sloan was a cover for episode 92. He has here. Always. How do you say them again? Always? Do I put a V in there?
No, it's always. Just think of the 2 V's as a W.
Okay, very clever.
Stitch them together.
I love that. Marry Me Archie was a huge jam on my playlist for a couple of years there. Or is it Archie Marry Me? Do you know which one it is?
It is Archie Marry Me, and it's the finest teenage fan club song they never wrote.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why I like it so much. All right, that was episode 83. And not to mention Toronto expat Joe Pernice of Pernice Brothers. Pernice or Pernice? I apologize, Jeff. Pernice, okay. That was episode 87. Maybe see if you can convince Joe and Molly Rankin to pay a visit to Mike's basement, LOL. But seriously, here's your question. How do you discover Canadian indie artists in a very crowded American, British, Australian, New Zealand, or indie rock universe? So before we kick out these Canadian jams, and I have a note from a great Canadian artist, actually, when he heard you were coming on to make your Toronto Mike debut, but how do you discover these great Canadian indie artists?
For me, it's a reflex, to be honest, because no one realizes this these days unless they're my age. But in the late 70s, there were very, very few punk rock scenes in the entire world, let alone North America. New York was obviously the first one in North America that had that tag anyway, the demarcation point where you decide something is a movement. And then very soon thereafter, there was one in Toronto. They were one of the earliest adapters. Probably around the same time San Francisco and Los Angeles got going and what Boston was doing, and eventually like Austin and Texas and Vancouver and Seattle and Portland had nascent scenes as well, starting around 77, 78. So there was, there were ones forming and they were producing some really extraordinary bands, but outside of New York, you didn't hear about any of those bands unless you lived there. Right. And Toronto was an exception. Those bands made a point of coming to New York. Like I did see the B-Girls and I saw the Diodes, for example, and they would play Max's Kansas City, and they'd play CBGBs, and they would tell us about the other bands that were there that never came here, like the Scenics and Simply Saucer, and I guess the Viletones certainly played here, although they came just before I was old enough to see gigs and then stopped. So I never did see the Viletones, sadly. But also, what else? Teenage Head was another one. I guess that's Hamilton, but
Yeah, I just want to shout out because the current drummer for Teenage Head gifted me the Teenage Head drumstick. So if you hear this during our chat, it's because I got to do something with my hands over here. So
that was erotic neurotic, right?
So okay. So by the way, when we kick out jams from some of these artists, we'll dive deeper. So spoiler alert, but he does. No, that was it for Jim. I told Jim he's cut off, but I gotta say. I'm so psyched about this, and I went on Twitter and just said, hey, Jack Rabid's making his Toronto Mike debut. And Ian Blurton, who he's been over here, love Ian Blurton. I loved Change of Heart. But he says, it's amazing, he wrote, that's you, Jack, you've been so supportive of Below the Rad. So Ian's just psyched to listen to this, and we got to do this for Blurton.
Thank you, Ian.
Shout out to
People
Ian
are so nice to me today.
Well, you know what, I'm warming you up, and then I'm going to hit you with the tough stuff coming up here. One last question, and then we kick out the first jam. Who's this from here? JR wrote, please ask Jack. And again, we are kicking out songs from these bands, so don't actually answer this question until we get to those songs. But please ask Jack about DOA and Young Canadians. Maybe he has some pull to get Joe Keithley in the basement before or after DOA's show at the Horseshoe in September. Kind of like Art Bergman. So just so you know, before we get to this first jam, which it's going to be related, Art Bergman was here, and it's one of the great episodes of Toronto Mike because Art and I just got into everything, and Art's still fucking rad himself. So that's what he's alluding to. To get it back to Toronto, I believe he's also a Sloan Always and Ron Sexsmith fan. You know what, Jack? Can I get to the first jam? So can I ask you one important question?
Go ahead.
You got to say go ahead. Yeah, I'm waiting for the go ahead here. Okay. Are you ready, Jack Rabid, to kick out the jams?
Well, there's no more MC5 members to do it, so I guess it's up to us now.
Let's go to fucking Hawaii, get drunk in the sun. I wanna lay in a Waikiki, get a tan on my butt. Running from the rain, thousands on the run. Making like the rich, heading for the fun. Let's go to fucking Tahiti, lounge on the beach. Those native girls are such a treat, singing to the native beat. Running from the rain, thousands on the run. Making like the rich, heading for the fun. 2 a.m., economy in 747, jet to the roof. Worked all summer, saved my money so I could be one. Let's go to fucking Miami, lounge along the beach.
All right, Jack, what are we listening to?
That's one of the greatest Canadian records ever made. Among many, many, many great records made by Art Bergman, my favorite stuff of his is definitely his band Young Canadians, who began life as the K-Tells very briefly in like 1978 and lasted until like 80 or 81. And boy, were they good.
So when
you can
did
hear it there, can't you?
Listen, again, big Art Bergman fan, and I fucking love this song too. I mean, I've even played this around the kids. They know they can't say this word at school, but Jesus, that's a great song. Love it so much. But when do you discover Young Canadians?
It's funny you asked that because I was in San Francisco for the first time in a decade a couple of weeks ago. And before that, I'd been going to San Francisco every 6 months. And so this trip, I got a chance to do what I'd done for 10 years before that every 6 months, which was take out the Vale to dinner. He always offers to go Dutch, and I refused to take a penny of his money because Search and Destroy, his magazine in the late 70s, and Slash magazine in Los Angeles in the late 70s were this massive window opening. I mean, as far open as you could have a window of what was going on the West Coast. And some of the LA bands and some of the San Francisco bands did make it to New York after I read about them and found their records. But only DOA and the Subhumans came to New York. Los Populeros did later. in the 80s. But in the 70s, all we got was DOA, and then one trip by the Subhumans in 80. And I owe Search and Destroy and Slash for letting me know that there was this absolutely stunning scene in Vancouver. I'm on record as saying that the Vancouver compilation is the finest compilation record in my entire collection out of, I don't know, 500 or 600 compilations that I still held on to. I will never part with that. It is the absolute epitome of a scene document, and a scene that was so varied it almost felt like what is really holding these bands together, other than that, or they're all just not commercial rock pablum. They're all just really wildly creative, and Young Canadians were among the stars of those scenes. Oh, and to answer your question about Joey Keithley, I can ask him for you because he's staying at my house this weekend.
Wow.
He and I have been friends since 1979, and my kids and I stayed with him in Burnaby. He's a councilman now. He's Councilman Joe Keithley.
Right.
And we stayed with him last summer, and I'm once again, for like the 20th time, going to return the favor, so I can ask him for you.
Yeah, let him know I'm in South Etobicoke, and he'll have a great time.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And Joe likes to talk, especially if he's in Toronto and you ply him with a couple of really good, what's that beer
Okay,
called?
this is Great Lakes
Great
beer.
Lakes Brewery?
And tell him without
Great Lakes
a doubt,
Brewery
all
beer.
he can drink Great Lakes beer, fresh craft beer brewed right here.
I think that might be
Etobicoke.
enough to hook him, because he and I have been having a beer together, all these years, and he's a wonderful human being to talk to. But thanks to Search and Destroy and Slash, I suddenly had this massive want list of bands I'd never even heard. All I did was read about them. And you couldn't find any of their records in New York at all, so I had to mail order them from Zed Records in, I guess that was Long Beach, South California, South Los Angeles, and a few other stores that did mail order. And pretty soon I even found some contacts in Vancouver, and I ended up buying like 40 records from these people. And I just couldn't believe the quality of these bands. They were so good.
Jack, I got to ask you about, so, I'm not quite as old as you, but I remember, having to go to the record store and buy, vinyl to listen to the songs I wanted to hear. But what do you think about today when, like, everything's on demand? Like, you can probably go to YouTube and find everything you'd want to hear practically. Like, do you think a lot of the fun was the pursuit, like, acquiring the tangible media?
Oh, yeah. But, probably the fun of the pursuit in 1880 was to, acquire sheet music before Edison invented recording with his team. The technology is going to change. I think it is a shame that people don't have the zeal that we had to have in order to find music. But I'm also a musician, quite obviously. And I do like that the music on the 5 albums I've been a part of is easily accessible to people anytime they want. It was so frustrating being on tour in the early 90s, and we'd show up at a club and people would seem really excited to see us, but they knew 2 of our songs, the 2 that they'd heard on the radio, and we were grateful for the radio airplay just because without them we couldn't have toured. But it was like, we've released 25 songs. And now people go to gigs and they know every B-side. They sing along with the most obscure tracks of my favorite bands. And I have to say, from a musician standpoint, I think I prefer that. But it does, your listeners can't see it, but I'm sitting in front of a whole bunch of CDs. And this is a joke I've used a few times recently because I find it very illustrative. But we had an electrician come in maybe 4 or 5 months ago because we had an electrical problem. And as I was paying him, he's this like 20-year-old Russian guy named Igor. And he's looking around and he goes, "You have lots CDs. You have lots vinyl." And I was like, yeah, I do. And he goes, "Why you have so many CDs?" I'm like staring at this 20-year-old electrician who's like right off the boat from Russia, right? I'm like, you're just not old enough to realize that this was the only way you were ever going to hear these bands. So if I wanted to hear "Let's Go to Fucking Hawaii" by the Young Canadians, there was absolutely less than zero chance that I could hear it unless I bought it, let alone hear it anytime I liked. And nowadays I can hear every obscure track. I can hear the demos, the entire Young Canadians catalog. Even I watched live videos of them that I never saw until like 5 years ago. It's a totally different world, no question about it. And it has a good point and it has a bad point to it.
All right, Jack, before I kick out the second jam, loving this very much, I'm going to take a screen cap of us so everybody can see these CDs behind you, okay? So I'll count you in here. Look, fuck it, we're doing it live. Okay, hold on here. Okay, 3, 2. There you go. We took our screen cap, so I'll be sharing that. Let's kick out another jam. Jack, what are we listening to?
Well, I did mention the Violtones earlier, didn't I? Oh, I wish I'd seen them. You know, it's not, I've taken my kids, they're 12 and 16, to like 40 or 50 shows. Neither one is old as I was when I saw my first gig at, 3 months shy of 17. Parents wouldn't let you go see rock and roll shows until you were like 16, 17 in those days. Very different times. So I just missed the Violtones, but that is actually one of the two-chord covers that my band Even Worse was covering in the year 1980 and 81. And you don't even notice that it's only 2 chords, the entire song. But talk about a song that a beginner could play, and yet those were not beginning musicians. Those people could really kill it, boy. It's kind of like the Ramones with one less chord. And of course the crazy, maniacal vocals of Nazi Dog, who also, I might add, was not his real name.
It's not on his birth certificate.
Not on his birth certificate, just like Jack Rabid. Not me and Nazi Dog have this in common. Pretty much nothing else.
Too good to be true, man. I got to say, what I dig about this episode is you're born and raised in the US of A and with an American perspective. And I feel like because we're your neighbors, but we're 1/10 your size in population and we have no nukes and we're, your little, I don't know, little brother. What are we? But I feel like we sometimes judge ourselves and our output on how you in America perceive our artists and bands. I love a lot of great Canadian music that Americans, I don't think they give a fuck about it, and that's fine by that, but it's something about hearing praise from an American aficionado like yourself that sort of feels good.
I've never been interested in hype or coolness or hipness or any of that stuff. I'm just interested in the music. And the great thing about Vancouver and Toronto punk in particular was that you just put on the record, like, oh, okay, I read about this band. I don't know what they sound like. They're not on the radio. None of my friends have a copy. Although in the Violtones case, my very close friend Nick Martin turned me on to them. Thank God for Nick Martin. He had all these obscure records in his collection when I met him. He's Joan Baez's nephew.
Get out of here. That's a fun fact right there.
He's a lovely human being, too, and he's still alive and in the same place. But he would play us bands like Legionnaire's Disease from Texas and the Violtones, and we would add them to our set. He was our bass player. But I think in the case of like Screaming Fist, you put it on once and you start jumping around the room if you're 16 years old like I was.
Yeah.
And just amazed that there's like this punk rock thing happening. Again, much like Vancouver, all the bands in Hamilton and Toronto did not remotely sound alike. They all had their completely unique conception of what they should be doing that was supposedly called punk rock. And the Violtones were the most intense and directly in your face of all of them. I guess like Simply Saucer and the Scenics would be the more esoteric, more like television, art rock sort of end of the street, Talking Heads kind of end of the street, Velvet Underground, and all the stuff in between, like the Diodes, who were a little more melodic, poppy, but also hard hitting. And wow, it's like every time you buy another record from a scene and it knocks your block off, you're like, wow, there's really something happening up there. And that's not a coincidence. All the bands are feeding off each other. They're like, competing quite openly with each other in a kind of positive way and playing with each other on bills at the Horseshoe Tavern or whatever. It's just like, heck, this is really something. And that catches my interest as well as my fandom.
Did I hear you say the Diodes?
I certainly did. Them I did see. Boy, were they good.
All right. Well, on that note, let's kick out another one, John. Hey, before we get into this great jam, where did you see the Diodes?
Max's Kansas City. They came fairly frequently. It's not that long a drive, really. Not like Vancouver.
Right.
And the club bookers, Peter Crowley in Max's Kansas City, and I guess it would still be Hilly Crystal at CBGB's at that time, were very supportive of the Toronto bands. There weren't that many bands from out of town coming. There were some from Cleveland, obviously, which was another kind of nascent scene of that time. But very happy to host them here and, kind of hype the shows and talk about them. And they'd get a whole bunch of write-ups in the New York Rocker, which was a place you could read about the Toronto bands, unlike the Vancouver bands, for example. And even Trouser Press would mention them. And, it was a really kind of an interesting press ecosystem between the fanzines and the more established magazines, and the kind of like places in between, like Slash and New York Rocker and Search and Destroy, kind of like half fanzine and half regular magazine.
Well, can you elaborate on that? I'm very curious.
Well, like Trouser Press, they probably sold like 40,000 copies, and they were kind of I wouldn't say slick, but they were obviously a glossy, well-distributed, well-produced magazine, even though at their heart they were really a fanzine. They were run by fans, and they covered really great music that they personally loved. And then there was a level above that, like Cream and Hit Parader, that really were commercial magazines that always had some articles every issue of bands I really liked. Hit Parader, not so many, and Cream, lots. So, there was the whole gradations of this. And then you went down from there. Search and Destroy probably sold like 15,000 copies, and it was like a tabloid style newspaper, but it was really well done. And Vale was just a genius, and the people who wrote for him really knew what time it was. And down in Slash, same thing. It was a tabloid, but the people writing for it, they just made me feel the music. Before I ever heard it, I just had this idea of just how vital it was and how viral it would feel in my life, how vivid the colors they painted. I never wanted to be a journalist. It was just by reading these people that when I actually accidentally fell into it, thanks to Dave Stein, that I naturally was going to write like those people, because I wanted other people to feel music the way they made me feel, just writing about music I'd never heard. And the Diodes, here's another perfect example of what I was talking about. This is when punk rock didn't have these ghettoizations and terminology. Like these days, we would consider them more like a power pop group. And other bands would be called psychobilly, and other bands would be called like art rock or noise or avant-garde or stuff. In 77, 78, and 79, the best part of it is if you weren't Foghat, and if you weren't like REO Speedwagon or Foreigner or Styx or something, that automatically you were punk rock, and that was very sustaining for 3 or 4 years there.
Is the Big Takeover like the oldest such like I don't know, indie magazine, like last one standing. I guess that's a very awkward way of saying, like, is there any older publications that have continued to publish until today?
None I can think of. There might be, just because not everything rises to your radar. There, you could well get an email this week saying, like, where does Jack get off? Claiming that 44 years is now the current standing record.
Well, because I went through a bunch of the ones I know about, and they're long. Most of them are long gone. And then you hear about Cream shut down in '89, and then it sort of reappeared. Yeah. I don't know if it's active today, but that doesn't count. Like, you can't.
Yeah, I wrote for their reappearance for a while, so I remember that well.
Yeah,
I cashed their checks.
And so you got some that might be around, I don't know, Spin or whatever. I don't know when Spin launched, but like the Big Takeover.
That was the mid-'80s.
Oh, mid-'80s. Okay, so there's none as old as the Big Takeover, as far as I know.
Well, yeah, Rolling Stone's been going longer, but they're obviously a corporate mag.
That's a different category, I think.
Yeah, I don't know of any. There may be one, and if so, kudos to them, because it's an absolutely quixotic. How do you pronounce that? I know it's derived from Don Quixote's name, but it's spelled quixotic. It's a quixotic thing that I've been doing all these years, and I should have quit long ago. The intrinsic rewards are so lovely, absolutely so lovely, that I don't feel compelled to stop, as I probably should.
And how many subscribers are we talking here? Like, you got thousands of subscribers, right? Like, you can't quit.
Only about 5,000 or 6,000.
So that's only, like, listen to you, like 6,000 people are like Jim Romanco are waiting to hear what you have to say next and check out your publication.
Plus about 4,000 store sales. Yeah, we do about 10 grand.
And if you love what you do, why would you stop? I guess that's like, why stop if you love it?
In part because for a while there, we were up to 35, 40,000 right after the internet first hit. And it was a boon instead of a bane for, independently produced print journalism.
Right.
For the first time, a lot of people could find me after I've been doing what I've been doing for 14, 15 years already. And so our circulation went up from like 8,000 to like 40,000. And now it's gone right back down to where it was. It's quite funny in that regard. But on the other hand, I'm competing with, literally thousands and thousands of pages of free content, and you can't do that with print. I've got to cover a $30,000 printer shipper bill every 6 months that I don't incur with our website, for example, where it's literally pennies. So it does require people to reach into their pockets and pay $7 or $8, or if they subscribe slightly less per issue. So you're pretty much down to just the real diehards in that sense.
Well, if somebody listening is like, that's my bag, I want in, where do you give us, like, what's the website, or where should we send them to subscribe?
It's bigtakeover.com and on shop.bigtakeover.com. I make it really super easy to find us. And the new issue, speaking of punk rock, here it's been 44 years. One of my favorite bands when we started this damn thing was The Damned, and they're on the cover of the new one, which is just hilarious to me. See, now I've been doing this 44 years. They've been doing it 48.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if you really have something good and you share it with people and they come to you and say, well, I really like what you did, that's the loveliest feedback, It's like, it's sincere. I really love the new Damned album. I don't have to sit around listening to, a record they made in the late 70s. I can just listen to their recent record and I'll play it over and over and over and over. That's all I'm looking for where it comes to art and culture, is something that completely rocks my world.
Well, here's a band that rocks my world, and I'm glad they're still doing their thing. Let's kick out another jam.
Away
the stage, Sloan. Love it, Coax me.
Sloan.
You know, the guy whose voice you hear on that opening cut there, welcome to the stage, Sloan, that's Brother Bill, and Brother Bill is a good listener of this program, so shout out to Brother Bill in White Rock, British Columbia. He loves his Canadian punk. But tell me about Sloan, not exactly a punk act.
Well, you know, I was a teenager when I got into punk rock. I still like punk rock. I get excited when you play these tracks for me, Mike. If you're trying to make a 16-year-old out of me again, you're succeeding wildly.
Okay, quick on that note. So Friday night, I'm under a beautiful Toronto sky. It was a great summer night, and I'm watching Cypress Hill at the C&E Grandstand. And I swear to you, because my wife's younger, she doesn't really know Cypress Hill, but I'm like, I'm fucking, right now, I'm like 19 years old again. It's like this miracle, like I'm just singing along to Cypress Hill like it's 1993.
Yeah, a lot of people, they use music because they hear a song and it reminds them of like having a date with some girl, or like the time they went on the road trip and listened to that tape. For me, I still hear the music. I don't even have to put it into any kind of context of anything I ever did in my life. And I still remember hearing that song like 30 years ago and going like, whoa. That, you know, Sloan are already really fine songwriters, and I really like a lot of their songs, but that one is just like one of the best melodies I've heard in years. And the 90s was such super abundance to me, you know, listening to a lot of shoegaze and dream pop and kind of like underground indie rock all at the same time, that to get a song that good from Sloan was just a real eye-opener, and I've been a absolutely massive Sloan diehard ever since. I don't want to embarrass him because I've gotten to know him a little bit in the last few years, oddly, but I think Chris Murphy, in a band with 4 extraordinary singers, mind you, has probably the best voice in rock and roll in the last 10 or 20 years. To me, he's up there with like John Lennon and some of those people who, when they sing a song, just the tail of their voice, like the way it lingers in the mic without overdoing it. He's just got this depth and richness to the sound of his voice. It reminds me of like Chris Bailey of the Saints, who I thought was like about the best singer I heard when I was a kid.
Well, Jack, you know, I'm pretty tight with Chris Murphy. I'm absolutely pulling that clip, and next time he's sitting down in this basement, I'm playing that clip for him.
I think he knows what a big fan I am. Well, actually, I'm the 3rd biggest Sloan fan in my house, which is just hilarious to me. My son is like chiding me because he plays me some B-side from 1998, and I kind of vaguely know it, and he's like singing along to it. I'm like, you bum, I was singing Sloan before you were born.
What was your jumping, like, what was your, were you into Smeared before you heard Coax Me? Like, were you into like Underwhelmed and the stuff from Smeared?
I loved Underwhelmed. That was the first song of Sloan I really did love.
Yeah, me too.
I thought lyrically it was wonderfully inventive and melodically as well. It wasn't like pure pop like the song we just heard, right. But boy, you know, it was very convincing. My problem with Sloan had nothing to do with them. It was really, again, an overabundance. I was going crazy over Swerve Driver at that time, and My Bloody Valentine and Sugar. And oh my God, people don't realize they act like the 90s was some kind of wasteland, but for me it was just, you know, like almost a rebirth. I was in my 30s. I was touring the entire North American continent in Springhouse. We played Lee's Palace, and we played the El Macambo, for example. So we actually made it up to your way and enjoyed the splendors of performing in Toronto.
I was going to ask you, so which band is this though?
Springhouse.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a poster somewhere of our Lee's Palace show, and the picture of us on the second album, of all the pictures we could have chosen, is us standing in front of Lee's Palace, in front of those funny like murals.
Of course. Iconic,
yeah, of course.
Iconic.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know. We'd never been there before, and I've never been there since. You know, I've only been to Toronto 4 or 5 times. So I have absolutely stunningly wonderful memories of doing that. And I was so busy playing in my band and rehearsing 3 days a week and making albums and touring and recording in Los Angeles and stuff like that it's almost like I didn't realize that Sloan was going to be one of the greatest bands of all time. I would have equated them at that time with like the Posies or some of the other bands whose albums I was listening to quite a lot. But Sloan proved their mettle by longevity and quality. endless quality. I mean, I don't know which album to reach for most of the time. Should we go back to the 90s? Should I play their new album?
Right.
How about one of their, how about Never Hear the End of It, which just completely floored me when it came out. Like, really, a double album that good? I may have 5 double albums in my collection that I don't think should be pared down, if that. And that's one of them.
Wow. I love the Sloan chat here. I know you are, but have you seen the Trans Canada Highwaymen?
I saw them a month ago.
Okay, because of course Chris Murphy's in that, and I think that's a fantastic group of Canadian musicians that
Again, my son Jim, who's 16, I caught him playing the Trans Canada Highway theme on the piano and singing it a couple of weeks ago. So, because I brought him to the show, and we were both struck by that being the one original in the set that wasn't, from their past.
Right. Yeah, that's fun. There, the Stephen Page on lead on that one, and
lovely tune.
Shout out
really
to the
funny too.
Ladies. Yeah, very funny. No, I mean, and speaking of funny, since we're both fanboying over Chris Murphy, super funny dude. Like, I want to say sneaky funny, but it's just he's always on, always witty, always funny. Just a great conversationalist.
I think the 3 or 4 times I've interviewed him and Jay together are some of my favorite interviews, because Jay is one of the most knowledgeable music fans I've ever met, and he's just as funny in a very different way as Chris. And the very natural and kind of unforced and a comfortable humor that they do, both self-deprecating and the opposite as well.
Yes.
People can often do one or the other. They do both really well. Both self-deprecating and
braggadocious.
Yeah, it's just really great. And because they get my references. I mean, like me, they grew up punk rockers later, of course, because they're not my age. But when I regale them with stories of them, the guy who got the Nils their record deal and stuff like that, we have something to talk about. And I'm friends with the Descendants, and that was like their favorite band. There's no shortage of things we can talk about without going back to the Beatles and, the Kinks and all our favorite 60s groups too.
Amazing. Loving this, Jack. By the way, if you do make another trek to Toronto, not only will I get you some of the fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery, but I have delicious, authentic Italian food from Palma Pasta. If you like lasagna, I'm your guy. I'm your dealer.
Yeah, my real last name is actually Corradi.
It's not Rabid.
Corradi, and my grandmother and grandfather were off the boat from up near Milan, so you don't have to invite me twice.
This thing of ours. Okay, let's kick out another.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, Jack, what are we listening to?
Well, you mentioned Joey Shithead. That is the incredible era of DOA. They've had many good ones, many good eras, and they've always been fun to see live. But when they had Randy Rampage on bass, Dave Gregg on guitar, may he rest in peace, may Randy rest in peace, and Chuck Biscuits on drums, they were the American Clash, or North American Clash. Them and the Dills, both of them, when they were friends, those two bands. So, Jesus, wow. I mean, just knock your socks off. I saw them open for Bad Brains in 79. Like I said, they were the one Vancouver band that got here in the late 70s. And I saw them do their own gig as well. And then they came back in, I guess that would have been the spring of 81. So I got to see that lineup maybe 4 or 5 times all told. And they always just completely floored me. Bad Brains and DOA were probably the finest musicians in North American history to be playing punk rock. They did, because you just stand there like with your mouth open going, how do you do that?
I got to let the listenership know. So I forgot you weren't sitting right here, Jack. I'm like, you're in Brooklyn. I thought you were right here. So when I was fading down the Big Takeover, and it's faded you down too. So I don't think the listenership heard. Some will know, but most won't. That was Bad Brains. So you took the name of your publication from a Bad Brains song.
Yes, and it wasn't released at that time. I think that was part of the fun of calling it Big Takeover. For a while, we were kind of like a stimulators-oriented magazine as well, so we had a couple editions as Cradle Robber, but Big Takeover was just what we were trying to do. What would the music business look like if me and Dave Stein took over? What would things be? It would no longer be the Eagles and Steely Dan and stuff like that. It would suddenly be, the Diodes and Pointed Sticks and the Avengers and the Weirdos and the Damned and the Buzzcocks and some of the more esoteric bands we were listening to too. I was a really big Talking Heads fan. I can still remember the first gig I ever saw was Talking Heads in XTC in 1978. So it was a good time to be 16 years old. Let's put it that way.
Born at the right time. And digging this very much. Quick piece of advice for the Canadians listening. Most of the people listening are Canadians. If you have any old cables, old devices, old electronics, maybe it's in a drawer or in some, your attic or your garage, don't throw that shit into the garbage because those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, and you'll find out from the good people at recyclemyelectronics.ca where you can drop that off to be properly recycled so those chemicals don't end up in our landfill. That's for the Canucks out there. That's I don't think that'll work in Brooklyn, buddy. Hot tip. Hot tip. Hey, yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say that one of the big pleasures I had throughout the 80s was DJing a lot of DOA's shows because I was the Rock Hotel DJ and that was the one booking them. And so every time they came, since they were the one Vancouver act that would come, before they would play, I'd do a set entirely of Vancouver punk rock. So I would play Private School and Active Dog, the U-Jerks, the Dish Rags, the Pointed Sticks, the Modernettes. And I would play Kill, 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 This Is Pop by DOA because that's the one Chuck Biscuits had sung. I was kind of having a dig at them. Plus, it's a fantastic song. And stuff like that. And they would go a little bit crazy while they were setting up their gear, hearing the stuff out of this massive PA at the Ritz. So the fanboy in me still exists for that stuff too. When I saw Pointed Sticks in Vancouver in New Westminster in 2016, again, I was invited by Joe, so I stayed at his house and we went to the gig. And between him and my friend Alan McGinnis, who writes for Big Takeover, they introduced me to two Dish Rags and a Wasted Life. And I probably was more excited to meet those people than anybody in all of the United States could be in the year 2016. I'm like, wow, two Dish Rags and a Wasted Life.
I love it.
Scoring here big time, plus hanging out with the Pointed Sticks. I have pictures of me as the sixth Pointed Stick that night.
Fucking love the passion. Now, that begs the question, on the 44 years of doing this, like, who is the artist you interviewed that you'd put in number one and like, I can't believe that happened. This is the dream come true. Like, is there a number one there?
Yeah, Ray Davies.
Yeah. Okay.
Brian Wilson too, but of course Brian Wilson was kind of mentally, challenged, I think is the polite way to say it. Whereas Ray Davies is quite the opposite. He's as sharp and funny and witty as he ever has been. And I got him to talk about so many Kinks songs that weren't like hit singles. And he was absolutely really, really in love with talking about those songs because no one asks them about Wicked Annabella or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's almost like I was acknowledging the rest of his family. Wicked Annabella. Yes, there's a story about that song.
So this is recorded audio, or was this a comedy?
No, it's for the magazine.
For the magazine.
Eric Idle was another one. I couldn't believe I was
big names you're dropping on me here. Massive names. Wow.
Well, yeah, because I mean, in a way, it's not surprising I do a cover story on Joe Strummer, and I would fight with him on who was going to pay the check at the Broome Street when it was over. I won. It was like this 5-minute brawl for who was going to pay, and he kept insisting and I kept insisting. It's just like V Vale all over again. And like V Vale, I actually said, look, Joe, there wouldn't be a Big Takeover if there wasn't the Clash.
Right.
I think I got you on that one, and he had to concede the point. But that surprises me less. I mean, Johnny Rotten was a surprise because I had to do that through Spin. But I got 2 hours with Johnny Rotten, and that was something that would have shocked the 16-year-old me to no end.
That's amazing. But so let's not brush by that too quickly. So obviously you've been writing for the Big Takeover for over 40 years now, but you also write for places like Spin and I don't know, Cream and Village Voice and
yeah. How'd you know that?
I did a little homework. Did a little homework.
Okay.
But I just want to point out, you're not, you're the Big Takeover's your baby there, and that's amazing. But you're also writing for, I don't know, you name it, All Music Guide.
In the 80s, I even snuck in a bunch of really interesting bands into Interview magazine, Andy Warhol's thing. Like I interviewed Husker Du for them,
Oh,
when they were still kind of a younger, more fledgling band. And oddly, to bring this back to Canada, one of the things I was talking about with Bob Mould in that interview was our mutual love of Canadian punk, because I hadn't realized, it wasn't known at that time, that he wasn't from Minneapolis. He was from a New York town on the border of Canada and was listening to Canadian radio. And in a way, we're back to what makes Canada special to me, is that because Canadian radio plays underground, supposedly non-commercial Canadian acts, they give the band a rationale to continue and gig and expect some, support from the community. We've never been good at that in America. So here's Bob sitting there listening to the Diodes on the frickin' radio. And it wasn't like, some real obscure college radio station. It was like the CBC or something like that.
Well, shout out to the CanCon regulations. Absolutely. The only problem is when bands like, I don't know, Rush and Nickelback take all that oxygen, right? As if they need the help, right?
You can't really banish bad taste. And by bad, I mean kind of like I'm not trying really hard here, so I'll just accept whatever lowest common denominator pablum is shoved down my throat by mass media. Yeah, most people don't really care enough to find out what's really going on in the arts, whether it's film or books or music or anything. They just, whatever they hear about in the osmosis is enough for them. I've never been like that. And fortunately, there are some Canadian acts over the years that have really benefited from a little boost of that sort.
Sure.
And I really wish we'd done that because, as I said, my own band Springhouse, we did get some MTV video play and we did get some commercial radio play, but always kind of like bottom of the barrel, 3 a.m. kind of thing, occasional track here or there. And we just couldn't really get a toehold to continue our band, which we would have if we could have been sustained in that way.
Fascinating. Hey, I'm going to ask you about a band that I always consider, like, if you merge bands like REM and Bruce Springsteen and like certain American bands, if you can merge them all, you might end up with the Tragically Hip. But I'm wondering if Jack Rabid has any thoughts on the Tragically Hip.
They're the band that did that song Jane, right?
No, that's Bare Naked Ladies.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't that following those bands that closely, actually.
Okay.
I respected them, and when I heard songs on the radio, I did like I'm an Adult Now, although the first time I heard it, I thought it was I'm on the Dole Now. I'm like, this must be an English band.
That's funny. He's 65 years old now, by the way. Mo Berg looks much younger, but 65.
I spoke to him very briefly at that show last month, and he seemed like a really sweet guy, actually.
He is a sweet guy, yeah. Well, he's from Edmonton, Alberta. They're all sweet from there. But they did, so Bare Naked Ladies, which is a Toronto band, they did, like, of course, they had a #1 Billboard Hot 100 hit. So that's a whole different, ball of wax.
Those bands were not Rush and April
but that's a #1, and not to mention like the theme song to The Big Bang Theory. But the Tragically Hip seemed like they were ours. Like they didn't seem to have. I mean, they did play. Dan Aykroyd got them to play Saturday Night Live one night, which was wonderful for me as a big Hip fan. But the Hip never had a U.S. hit, whereas Bare Naked Ladies went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Yeah.
So, but hey, let's get back to your jams, my friend. I just wondered if there was any. No,
I really respected those bands, so it was quite pleasurable to me to go to the show, and I knew almost all of the set that they were doing, apart from the Sloan songs. I didn't. The fourth guy's music I wasn't that remembering.
Craig Northey from the Odds.
I didn't remember the Odds quite as well. Maybe a couple of tunes, but the other two bands I did actually know all the songs they were doing in their set. So at least I wasn't a complete novice.
Well, listen, that's how you discover.
And that song Jane is really awesome, by the way, even though it's not the Tragically Hip.
Well, I used to live near that intersection, so it's named after the intersection of Jane
Yeah,
Street
I read
and
that.
St. Clair. And I used to live near Jane and Dundas, which I could throw a rock and hit Jane St. Clair. There's nothing at Jane St. Clair, by the way. If you go there, you'll be underwhelmed. But that's a Sloan song.
Yeah, I read that. See, this is still the way I am. You know, I loved the version I heard at the gig, and I decided to play the original version on my own podcast. I do a radio show every Monday for 10 years now. And so I fished out the original version of that song, and I looked up on like Wikipedia or whatever little tidbits about it. So I did I'm still discovering even about music that I've heard all my life. I still like look up tidbits about it. And I want to know everything there is to know about a song that is really genuinely interesting. And I came across that very factoid you just mentioned.
It sounds, Jack, like you want to you want to see the big picture. All right, Jack, what are we listening to here?
Oh, man, Subhumans. Thank God they did make it once to New York. I was the doorman to their Only Manhattan show. My only stint as a doorman at any club on any night in my life. It was $2. It was an unannounced show. It was the Bad Brains and Subhumans. And my good friend Jesse Mallon had $1, and I let him in anyway, so I clearly had no talent as a doorman. But, man, that band just completely rocked. They were super hot, and they were super friendly. They couldn't have been nicer. Just like DOA, they just like were these really great big lugs, you know, like these really imposing punk rockers who could literally beat the living crap out of you if you were really, you know, one of these punk rock hater people who wanted to start something with them. It was very helpful to them. But they were just a great, great band. And the night before at Maxwell's in Hoboken, they even stopped their show because Nick Martin lost his contact lens. So all four Subhumans and like 20 of us in the audience are all like on all fours in front of the stage looking for Nick Martin's contact lens. And we couldn't continue with the show until Nick had his contact lens back. And that was, you know, punk rockers really, people had the wrong idea about us, you know. We were really just having a bang up time and trying to actually have some genuine substance to our culture and some black humor and the rest of it.
Fucking love it. Oh, you hit the post there too. Okay, amazing. The Subhumans, big picture. Now, this band, you reference this compilation, so I want to kick out this next jam because I want to hear more about this Vancouver complication, if you will, here. So let's kick this one.
Like Germany in 43, but everyone was down on me and things were closing in. All my ideals, all my dreams breaking out at the seams without discipline. And no one wanted to believe me, I was up against the wall when she came marching in to save me like a guardian general. She had it worked out to an art. Now she's in command of my heart. I let the boots spin back time on a golden wire, now she's so military. I was broken, I was dirty, but she promised not to hurt me since humanity. I know I never understood me, I had visions, I had plans. She mapped out the way it could be, offered me a stick right hand. She had it worked out to an art. Now she's in command of my heart.
All right, Jack, talk to me about this jam.
The Pointed Sticks, who we were talking about before. I know this is a very Vancouver-centric playlist that I picked today.
That's okay.
But these bands, they, you know, even in Eastern Canada, a lot of them are not as properly recognized perhaps as they should be, apart from like record collectors who spend $150 on one of their records or something. But that is the opening track on Vancouver Complication. Really sets the tone. I think it was the finest Pointed Sticks recording ever, you know, considering how many great records they ended up making. Again, the energy just leaps out at you. And different types of energy. I mentioned the U-Jerks. They were really completely like a harsh synth band in the mode of like Suicide or the Screamers, right? They didn't have a drummer or a guitar player, I don't think. And I think I almost got to see No Fun. That was one of the bands on that compilation. They played last year when we were in Burnaby, but I had my 2 kids with me, and I really had plans to take them to Stanley Park. You know, I'm trying to be a dad.
Of course, you got to do that, yeah.
They wouldn't known a single No Fun track. It would have been a little weird, but I'm kind of kicking myself. I probably should have just made them go anyway. It was a gig in New Westminster again.
Yeah, what an education, man. You're doing them a great service here. But
yeah, we got the Dish Rags again, the Wasted Lives, Active Dog, Private School, the K-Tells before they became Young Canadians. So that is the very young Art Bergman, probably his first released recording at that. Wow. The Shades, E with a question mark, you know, kind of the weirdo aspect of the record. Who else? Exotone, and of course DOA, Kill Kill Kill, This Is Pop, and I Hate You. Just really raw, really exciting, you know, complete punk rock to the up the wazoo factor, and you know, with the original trio DOA. So when I see DOA play on Saturday night, I'll remember, you know, how that record just completely floored me, finding a copy at long last. It was probably like out 2 months before I could get one, and now it's a massive collector's item, mind you.
And Jack, it's kind of amazing and awesome that Art Bergman has the Order of Canada, and that's like such a prestigious, you know, recognition you get in this country, and he's in the Order of Canada.
I got an email from Art about a month ago. I'd never spoken to him before, you know, after being his fan since 1979. So it's always kind of like I see it in my inbox and I go, Art Bergman wrote me an email, you know, like what? Oh, I'm going to enjoy reading this, because we just had a gigantic feature in our magazine about Art that the aforementioned Alan McGuinness did, and you know, covering all aspects of his career and his most recent albums, which have been fantastic. Yeah. Again, you don't have to go back and listen to Let's Go to Fucking Hawaii or the K-Tells track on that compilation, which was I Hate Music, if my memory serves. You could just play his recent record, like Christo Fascists or something like that, from his second to last album, or one of the tracks, and you'd be like, this guy still really has something to say, and he still has an edge to his playing, and I really, really like it.
Now, I can tell you, because I've seen him in I think it was last year, I saw Art Bergman at the Horseshoe Tavern here in Toronto on Queen Street, and he doesn't touch the Young Canadian stuff. Like, there is no Hawaii or whatever on the playlist.
It doesn't have to be about nostalgia, no.
Right. So
he just did a gig this weekend, in fact, in Vancouver. Yeah. Alan blogged about it, which is how I know about it. I wish I'd been in Vancouver. I could finally see him play for the first time in my life. Because as I said, the Los Populares did make it to New York in the 80s, but I was in California. So I've never laid eyes on Art Bergman, and I've had one email from him in my life like a month ago.
Finally, an artist I've met that you haven't. That's
there you go.
One for me. Good. Yes. Okay. So before I kick out this next jam, I would just like you to know, and everyone listening, that there's awesome semi-pro baseball happening at Christie Pitts in Toronto. High caliber baseball, no ticket required, man. Just the city can just come and fill the hill at Christie Pitts, watch some great baseball. Grab a beer. You can drink the beer in the park. You don't have to worry about the fuzz, man, because it's completely legal. It's all good. You grab a hot dog, whatever. And this coming Sunday, which is August 4th, 2024, yours truly, for some reason, yours truly is throwing out the first pitch. So I'm just going to let people know, come watch me, maybe hopefully not embarrass myself, and then I'm going to record live from the ballpark. So jump on a mic and say hi. It'll be fun. So Christie Pitts for Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. It's a good time, man. See all the stuff you're missing living in Brooklyn? I don't know. Maybe you got something going on there. But you want to kick out. This will be the anti-penultimate jam. Let us kick it.
Noticing the traces of the last appearance. When they saw me, they all recall. You're a little guy who never missed a battle. Give me the time to make up my mind. Sitting on a laboratory of people, noticing the traces of your last appearance. When they saw me, they all recall. You're a little guy who never missed a battle.
Jack, tell us what we're listening to here.
Well, that's the Nils, one of the greatest bands ever out of Montreal. Not often the one that people mention when they think Montreal because they think of like Arcade Fire or something like that. But for me, that cassette when it came in my apartment in the mail in 1983 was another one of those things where it just totally floored me. I expected nothing. I'd never heard of the band. They just stuck a tape in an envelope, not even a padded envelope. Like it kind of got beat up on the way from Montreal. I'm like, these clowns, they don't know what they're doing, right? And haven't they ever heard of the Dills? This is ridiculous. So I put it on kind of to make fun of it. You know what I mean? One of those moments. I was like 21 years old. And the song Scratches and Needles hadn't gotten, I don't know, 40 seconds in. I went like, what the hell is this? This is extraordinary. That song we heard, though, that one is called Give Me Time. And the third of my three bands, Last Burning Embers, covered that on a compilation coming out of Canada. Nils tribute album from 1998. It was called Scratches and Needles, a tribute to the Nils, put out by Woody Whalen of Magwheel Records. I've never actually met Woody, but I've been talking to him for like 25 years. He's a great Canadian record label guy and music fan and helper to the Nils. And he put out a compilation of theirs called Green Fields and Daylight that includes that Now cassette they sent me in 83. And to me, that's still the finest Nils stuff. The only thing I should say is we weren't called Last Burning Embers on that. We were called Worship Gray very briefly when we began. That's what we were called. But it has like Down by Law and Punch Buggy and New Sweet Breath and Stand GT. It's a really interesting compilation. And I'm really glad that Alex, the singer-songwriter in the Nils, was still alive, so he could hear all of us bands doing those songs. I'm pretty sure he was still alive. I'm almost definitely sure, because Alex was a friend of mine. I got to know that band. They stayed with me every time they came to New York after I wrote them back breathlessly, saying, you know, your cassette is just extraordinary. We need to bring you to New York ASAP. And then, as I said, I got them their record deal. It turned out to be a real lemon. But at least it got them their album out, and nobody had been signing them. They'd been going for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and all they could eke out was 2 really barely 12-inch EPs and that cassette. So they really, really needed an album. So at least it accomplished that before it all turned sour.
Look at you. Now, we didn't really establish this, but in all these bands that you're in, you're the drummer, right?
Yes, I'm the drummer. It's true.
Just and
I don't write songs. I write lyrics.
What is your? Oh, you write the lyrics. Okay. What is your?
A lot of them, not all of them.
What is your active band? Like, if you're gonna play something now, what band are you in right now? Of all these bands I've been hearing about.
Technically, none of them.
Okay.
Springhouse broke up in '93. Even worse in '84. Last Burning Embers, I'm guessing around 2004. But Springhouse keeps doing a reunion tour every 8 years. We're like cicadas.
Yeah, right.
Every 8 years, we seem to get a really great offer that sounds like it'd be mad fun. And the three of us have stayed really close friends all these years. We did not break up because of any schisms in the band or lack of desire to play music. It was just impossible to sustain a working band. We don't have to be a working band to do reunion tours. We do like 3 or 4 rehearsals, and then we go out on the road, and we're having a grand old time. Unfortunately, our last tour 4 years ago was opening for the Chills, and Martin Phillips died yesterday.
Oh.
So all of us in Springhouse are mourning tremendously. We played with the Chills in 1990 as well. Martin was our really close friend. So shout out, as you say, to the late Martin Phillips for all the incredible Chills music over the years. And then another band that we did 2 tours with after we'd broken up, the Chameleons. Mm-hmm. They're playing here in New York next week, not to transition so quickly from somebody dying. but we don't need to bring people down on the podcast.
Well, look, I'm sorry for your loss. Losing these artists. It's a moment where you can sort of
friend, yeah,
and
really good friend,
right, and friend. But even just from the artist perspective, it's sort of a very sad thing, but an opportunity to sort of recognize. I always feel like we should do this before they pass away. But what happens will be an artist will die, and then I'll be like, how did I miss these guys? These guys are fucking awesome. I'm like, why didn't I discover them like when they were here? Like, it's like this phenomenon where it's like you dive in.
Or why didn't I value them more while they were here, which is a mistake people make.
Right.
You've hit on an absolute ironclad piece of my philosophy, which is that the time is now. The time to appreciate things is while you have them. One of the absolute worst tendencies of human beings, and I'm trying not to be like, mad at anybody or putting anybody down. It's just human nature. We tend to value things when we lose them.
Absolutely.
My philosophy has always been the opposite, like girlfriends, movies, a gift somebody gives me, staying at somebody's house. A visit from Joey Keighley this weekend.
Mind-blowing.
To me, you just gotta grab it and appreciate it and really value it while it's yours, because you won't have these people forever.
Wow.
We did get Martin for an extra 7 or 8 years because he was supposed to die 8 years ago and he was saved by a miracle drug, but we always knew he was living on borrowed time.
Wow.
With 20% of his liver function. But yeah, I mean, this is what I've been doing. I've been making magazines. I've been DJing for years on end. I've been playing in bands. I've just been hanging out with people, enjoying their company. I'm just, someone who tries to follow his passions. I have a great interest in economics and early American history and lots of other things as well. So it's part of being a vibrant human being. Music is really reflective to me of all of life. So it's not like geekdom to me.
Do you watch any sports?
I'm a tremendous sports fan. Every Sunday I play a doubleheader in softball at shortstop, and often Wednesdays as well. And my father bequeathed me all 4 of my main teams, but I follow all 4 of the major sports, mostly baseball and ice hockey. I can still remember names of like Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens from the late 70s and stuff like that.
Shout out to Daryl Sittler.
Yeah, Daryl Sittler or Yvonne Cornwallis or something like that. That's the stuff I grew up with. I think my first game in 1968 was the Rangers against the California Golden Seals, who were the absolute last franchise over the last 80 years to fold in any of the 4 major sports. They moved to Cleveland for 1 year, became the Barons, and just folded.
Well, hey, since you mentioned Cleveland.
No Cleveland, no Bowie.
Just got to play that. That's shout out to FOTM Michael Williams. Hey, let's play something more recent. Some of these songs are been around a long time, but here's something more current. Let's kick out your penultimate jam.
See how it goes, and I find myself
Didn't want to fade it down, Jack. Always.
And you made it to the key change. Well done.
Couldn't help myself. Okay, this is Belinda Says. So how did you discover Always?
We were right on them right from that Archie Marry Me song. We're really big Teenage Fan Club fans, for example. And we knew a kindred spirit. And sure enough, they knew like every obscure New Zealand and Australian and Scottish and English band there was that me and my friend Jeff Kelson liked. And you can hear it in their music. They're really consummate music fans, and they're really talented musicians, and she's an awesome vocalist. So we've been talking a lot about Sloan. Chris and Jay keep reminding me that my two favorite Canadian bands these days have utter and total Nova Scotian and Prince Edward Island roots in them, don't they? They're just moved to Toronto.
You are 100% correct. I know, Chris Murphy's from Prince Edward Island, but they all meet up in Halifax, and that's definitely a Maritimes band, Sloan. But now we took them. We end up. I don't know if you know Biff Naked. You know the artist Biff Naked?
I've heard the name.
Okay, so she was forever a Vancouver gal, but she now lives near me here, and it seems like a lot of these great artists end up in Toronto at some point. I only mention Biff because she's going to be here later this week, so if people want to hear Biff Naked, she'll be in the basement, though. I don't let her zoom in because she's local here. But loving this, I just want to let you know, we talked a little bit about death earlier and loss and, how that can trigger different responses, and we should appreciate people now. Like, don't wait till you're reading an obituary. Like, appreciate this art now, appreciate these artists now. But I just want to let people know that Ridley Funeral Home has a great podcast called Life's Undertaking, and Brad Jones, who's the funeral director there, he's the host, and we talk about themes like this. We talk about, like, not only what is it like to be to own and operate a funeral home where you and your family live on premises. Like, that's wild in 2024. But we talk about, celebrations of life and what happens when people pass and how we remember them. And it's very interesting. So people should subscribe to Life's Undertaking.
Yes, and certainly Molly Rankin is no stranger to being scarred by sudden death. Obviously, her dad was in the Rankin family and was killed in a car crash. Something we talked about in the cover story we did with her and the guitar player. So, it's true. I think she really liked her dad an awful lot, and she ended up going on tour with the Rankin family. They kind of took her under their wing after her dad died, to kind of give her something to do and, right, kind of mourn with her. So you're absolutely right. Life is just what we have of it while we have it. And we ought to fill it with as much good stuff and stuff that really turns us on as we can in an intelligent manner anyway.
No, absolutely. So before we end this with one last song, we talked earlier, I was curious about the Tragically Hip, but there are a few huge artists, I should say, that I just want to get your thoughts on these artists before I kick out the final jam here. We recently speaking of loss, we recently said goodbye to Gordon Lightfoot. Just curious your thoughts on Gordon Lightfoot.
Gordon Lightfoot was one of the few artists my dad and I agreed with. There may have been 4 or 5. My dad was kind of like the great American songbook guy. He really liked like Perry Como and Frank Sinatra and oddly Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. Definitely the jauntiest stuff I heard in my house as a preteen. But the stations he listened to, the adult listening stations, it was all this really kind of like airy, inoffensive kind of, non-challenging stuff. And then they would play Sundown. Yeah. And my ears would always prick up and say, who is this guy? Who is this? This is good. I like this. What is this? And then, I heard the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald and I was completely sold. And then I did a little of my own research back in those pre-internet days when I was doing my own research. Back then it was a good thing. And I bought like a couple of his records and ended up being, a substantial fan of his. From there I went, this is the sort of rabbit hole thing I do. From there I ended up at Ian and Sylvia.
Well, okay, that's a teaser. I will say this. So yeah, Ian's no longer with us. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. Yeah. But Sylvia was just on Toronto Mike within the last 6 months, and we had a good chat. And that's a teaser for the final jam. But 2 more big artists, 2 more massive Canadian artists, internationally renowned artists I just want to ask you about. One is Neil Young.
That's funny you mention him because that was the biggest mistake I've ever made as a fan was discounting him as a teenager. In my early 20s, I realized the error of my ways and recounted, and I didn't take Torquemada to threaten any kind of punishment on me. I was like, boy, I really missed the boat on that. And oddly, the way I did is I became a really big Buffalo Springfield fan. And then when I bought those 3 albums, it all clicked to me that the solo Neil Young was a genius too. So of these days, I have probably about 30 or 40 of Neil's records. Wow. And I have a tremendous respect for even the bad records he made, that he made them. Right. Like insisting on constantly challenging himself is to me the definition of an artist. Just because I didn't like it, doesn't mean it isn't valid art if he was doing it for the right reasons. And soon enough, he got back to doing stuff more in my personal taste. Right up to the more recent records he's made. I've enjoyed those too. Speaking of Ian and Sylvia, I saw a video on YouTube of him appearing at like a logging strikers thing, like him and his wife playing for 250 people on like the Madison Square Garden shows I've seen him at. And he was singing 4 Strong Winds, I think was one of the tunes that he did.
He definitely does that one. Absolutely.
And endlessly moving. I mean, the guy's in his 70s now. I guess he's pushing 80.
Pushing 80. I had tickets to see him in early July, and he canceled because of I don't know who was unwell. Somebody was unwell, and I hope it's nobody, to be honest. But so I didn't get to see him, but I have seen him before. Just worship this guy, Neil Young, like a living legend.
Yeah, I mean Ray Davies, Neil Young. I never got to interview Neil Young. He's too famous in a way. Can't get anywhere near him. Yeah. But the people who made music because they really loved it, could make hit records. It was never a dichotomy like that. When I was a kid, you could have hit records and they would be incredible. And you could make albums where the rest of the album wasn't filler. They'd be some of your favorite all-time songs. And that describes the Kinks and Neil Young and Buffalo Springfield and the Hollies and the Who and all those people, to me, just endless delights with their music.
Last name before we kick out something that we've alluded to just moments ago, but Joni Mitchell.
Joni jams. Yeah, how many people come back from losing the ability to play their instrument? I think it's a great story that she actually had to watch videos of her playing her own songs to not only learn how to play her own songs again, but how to learn to play the guitar again. And if you don't respect that, you're not a music fan. Because I've never learned how to play anything but drums because I don't want to suck. It's really a failing of mine. I should just be modest and suck and learn an instrument like guitar or piano or something. But I can't imagine what it would be like to learn the drums again from start. Like having absolutely no ability to play it. Right. Just wake up one day and I can't play a lick. That would be so strange to me. I don't know if I could do what she's done. And of course, her back catalog is tremendous. One of my favorite interviews was interviewing Graham Nash. And we talked a lot about the 2 albums that each of them wrote about the other, after their breakup. And he said, yeah, I know. I have a real weakness for really smart, beautiful women.
Don't we all?
And then I added, and talented.
Yeah, don't forget talented too.
That is a pretty good triumvirate for any boy or girl you want to date in your life, I think.
Absolutely.
Especially if they're really nice.
So, Jack, I want to say thank you to Jim Romanko, who made this happen with the email I wrote off the top, and I'm glad he did because I really enjoyed this chat. So here is.
I owe you a drink.
Well, get your ass over here.
Pick up the check.
Yeah, he'd cover that. I know. What did we learn from another? Someone else wrote in and said DOA's here in September playing the Horseshoe or whatever. So you got to get your butt up here for that maybe, and then we'll take care of everything. But hey, let's kick out that final jam. It's a Canadian classic. Could be our national anthem, for goodness sakes.
Surprising one, huh?
4 strong winds that blow lonely, 7 seas that run high, all those things that don't change, come what may.
Jack, why did you choose to close here with 4 strong wins from Ian and Sylvia?
Well, remember, I was a Beatles fan growing up, and my punk rock fandom as a preteen really was looking up all the influences on the Beatles, buying records by like Larry Williams and Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Arthur Alexander and Gene Vincent. I went crazy on 50s rock and roll and R&B. And I think if that's not the original punk rock, then folk music was, certainly topically and lyrically. I almost picked Buffy St. Marie's The Universal Soldier instead, because that's obviously more punk rock in terms of lyrics, and I came at that song originally from Donovan's cover as a kid. But folk music, even if it's about romance or about like a song like that, you know, where if you're missing someone and you're not sure it would really work if they ever got back together with them anyway, it's really affecting. It's really moving. Whether the original version or Neil Young's current covers of it, let alone the ones he's released. It's a quintessential Canadian song to me because he's lonely up in the Canadian prairies in Western Canada, you know, and he's kind of mooning over this romance that fell apart and not sure whether he should send for her. And it kind of illustrates that whole Canadian American like conversation we've been having for years, also between urban and non-urban places, even within countries. So it's just a really moving and stirring song to me, and it kind of says Canada.
Like I said,
to be honest, I also almost picked the Trans-Canada Highwaymen theme because it's the most recent Canadian song I've fallen in love with.
oh man, you can't go wrong with that. But I'm glad you closed it
Hey!
with this.
Just keep yelling, hey! Hey!
It's super funny. Those guys are funny together too. Damn it. If you're looking
really
for a Toronto
wonderful
Mic'd
show.
episode to listen to, Stephen Page and Chris Murphy in the basement from, I don't know when that was, last winter, I guess. It was amazing. And you would love that. But I loved this very much. And then let's not bury the lead. You're still going. You're still rocking the Big Takeover. People can subscribe today. It's been, 44 plus years. And it sounds like my cup of tea, man. So keep on rocking in the free world, Jack.
It's only because people like you are nice to me that I keep it going. I probably could have had a much more fulfilling living, and at least monetarily doing something else, but this is a really fulfilling living and just way I spend my time. So thank you very much.
Money isn't everything, Jack.
No, it's not. Well, you're dead right about that.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,526th show. You can follow me. I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky. I'm all over the place at Toronto Mike. Go to torontomike.com. If you want to subscribe to the Big Takeover, thebigtakeover.com is where you'll find that. Subscribe to Jack Rabid's excellent magazine. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta, RecycleMyElectronics.ca, the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, and Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow.
Drink some Guinness from a tin. 'Cause my UI check out